Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Hi everyone, we're back with episode 11 of the Leo Training Podcast. We've got a fantastic episode for you today. My guest is Allan Phillips. In this interview, Allan and I discuss the delicate balance of optimizing strength and endurance. We're going to discuss how to effectively program for both disciplines. We'll also talk about what you should be prioritizing in your training to achieve your best performance, as well as what we feel are the best ways to schedule your training. Let me take a moment to tell you a little bit more about Allan. Allan Phillips is a strength and conditioning specialist and co-owner of Pike Athletics based in San Antonio, Texas. Along with his coaching duties, Allan is a top-ranked professional speed golfer, having been ranked as high as number 2 in the world. As an endurance coach, Allan is certified through USA Triathlon and the American Swimming Coaches Association. His athletes have won multiple national championships and have represented the United States at the 2012 London Paralympic Games. Not limited to the endurance sport world, Allan is very active teaching Strong First principles as a kettlebell and bodyweight instructor. He is also certified in the Functional Movement Screen and with Titleist Performance Institute. Allan has written extensively in the strength and conditioning field. He co-authored the Swimming Science Troubleshooting System and is a regular columnist of the Swimming Science website Swimmer Magazine. His work has also been featured by Sports Rehab Expert, StrengthCoach.com, Functional Movement Systems, and SwimSwam News, The Active Network, and Livestrong. Without further ado, we'll roll into episode 11, Optimizing Strength and Endurance. Allan Phillips, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm stoked for this episode, for this discussion. We're going to cover some awesome ground. We're going to be discussing everything between strength and endurance. And I think there's going to be a ton of valuable information for everybody that tunes in to this episode. So how about you kick things off, talk about your background and your journey into health and fitness?
Sure. Well, if we could match the quality of the previous guests you've had, and I'd encourage everyone to go back and listen to them. If we can match that level, I think we'll have a good show. But in terms of myself, I'll start back in high school. So I started, actually before high school, I played baseball, basketball. I was pretty decent at it. By the time I got to high school, I was still pretty skinny and weak, and going to a school that had one of the top basketball and baseball programs in the country, my prospects of getting beyond the freshman team did not seem very good. So I kind of assessed things and said, well, I could try out for baseball, freshman baseball and basketball, and maybe play a year and probably get cut from the junior varsity my sophomore year. So instead of that, I tried out for the golf team and made the golf team. Back then, golf was kind of a nerdy kid sport. It was kind of the repository for the kids who couldn't play baseball, basketball, or anything else. It's changed a little bit now, thanks to Tiger Woods, but that was kind of the landscape of sports back then. I wasn't that great at golf, but got good enough to play college. Played at Emory University, a pretty strong D3 program in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's really where my strength and fitness journey kicked off seriously, because that cat named Tiger Woods jumped on the scene around that time, late 90s. And before that, golf fitness was there were a few guys who were doing it, but wasn't really mainstream. And Tiger comes along, starts beating everyone's butt. And then everyone's like, well, gosh, I got to copy what he's doing. And so I started getting in the gym, became fairly commonplace for golfers around the world to dedicate themselves to fitness. Looking back at the situation I was in at the time, it was kind of funny because there weren't a lot of resources for golf fitness back then. Basically, it was our team wasn't even into it yet. It was just kind of me talking to my coach saying, hey, I want to get a little stronger, get a little fitter. So he hooked me up with the guy who was essentially our de facto strength and conditioning coach. He didn't have the title. It was basically just some dude on the track and field staff who knew a little bit about weightlifting. And our varsity weight room was essentially a closet where the general population fitness equipment, which was kind of the main part of our physical education facility, basically where all that broken equipment went. So that was our varsity weight room. And looking back, there were some really good things about what we did. Some really we hit the basic lifts like, bench and squat. But some of the other things, I look back at the workout card, we've got like upright rows and preacher curls, and nothing wrong with those exercises. But for a golfer with a training age of about 0 or 6 months, that's probably not the most high priority thing to put in the program when you're training only 2-3 days a week. So that was kind of my introduction to fitness. On the cardio side, became friends with one of the cross country coaches on staff, and I've been doing just some jogging on my own. He got me organized with things, and being competitive, I said, I got to challenge myself. So I entered some 5Ks, and 5Ks became 10Ks, 10Ks became halves became fulls, and you kind of get the whole addictive quality of the endurance side, and just kind of keeps going and going. So the endurance side took on a life of its own, as we'll talk about throughout the podcast. So I graduated and played 4 years in college at Emory University. Didn't achieve my goals on the golf course, which was to play professionally. I was decent, but not good enough to play professionally. I was pretty frustrated with my game as well. I just hadn't achieved what I wanted to. And one of the things about the fitness side that was attractive to me was that, unlike golf and probably a lot of sports, where the harder you try, the worse you get, with fitness in the gym, whether it's running, whether it's lifting, whatever it was, at least as a relative newbie to that part, the harder you try, the better you seem to get. And so that was a nice thing. It was a nice reward. And obviously that process of trying harder and getting better doesn't last forever. But at the time, it kind of kept me coming back for it. So after undergrad, went off to law school in sunny Southern California, where I really caught the triathlon bug. And that led to a whole new world of training with the swimming and the biking on top of the running. So after that, got my law degree, went off, practiced law for a while, got married while I was to my wife, who I met in law school. We got married after I graduated. She was in the college coaching realm, so she ran in college. And on the fitness side, I got involved with some of her teams. I'd always stayed involved with trying to stay fit. So did some stuff with her teams, had some friends that I coached on the side relatively informally. But to fast forward a few years, eventually she left college coaching, went into the private industry with on the coaching side and personal training and strength and conditioning. Was working in a gym in Arizona, and the boss of the gym wanted to get involved in golf fitness. And he said, hey, Allan, he's kind of a fit guy. He played golf. Would he be willing to help out? And she asked me, I said, sure, I guess. And, did some research on the whole golf fitness side and came across, Titleist Performance Institute, TPI, which a lot of people in the health and fitness industry are probably familiar with. When I went out to their level 1 certification, which was in February 2010, I think it was, that was really the gateway to changing my life in terms of my involvement in this field. That was like, wow, I can't believe this exists. Bringing the whole technique and biomechanics and strength and conditioning and medical and psychology and nutrition and equipment and all that under this one umbrella, with everyone at the table talking about how can we make the client or the athlete better and perform maximally. And that was just, at that point I said, wow, I got to go all into this. And so they're fairly involved with functional movement screen, the people there. So that led me to FMS. FMS led to the Hardstyle Kettlebell, and not just those worlds themselves, not just those curriculums themselves, but all the amazing people and resources that have come out of that. So that's, I followed I've that's basically where I've been since then. Along the way, also joined the Army, where I'm serving active duty right now. So I'm not training people full time, but, try to balance all those things together. And I'm sure at some point we'll talk about my, speed golf career, perhaps, since, along with that other stuff, I play, professional speed golf. So I left golf for a while, came back to it, and now, been fortunate to play it, in a situation where I can make a little cash on the side.
Wow, that is incredible, man. You have had quite the journey.
It's crazy. Sometimes you look back on it, you try to set up a path on your life and you think you've got everything mapped out nice and neat, but then, some of the best things that come out of life are the random things that happen. And there have been several key moments along the way from, that first TPI, at least in the sports and fitness industry, for that first TPI, then when we went to our FMS, it was still when Gray Cook and Lee Burton were teaching those level ones personally. Now they've kind of outsourced some of that stuff to their assistants, but we learned from Gray and Lee personally. And not only that, we sat second row, and we were sitting right behind. You might know the names Keith Sneidman and Patrick Ward, two very prominent people in this field. And so that was like, I wish I could say it was designed to come across some of these things, but that's just dumb luck. And so our lab partners for learning the FMS are two of the smartest people in the entire field on the planet. And then, that leading to what was then the RKC by Pavel and all the amazing resources that have come out of that. So it's been a pretty fun journey.
Wow. That's cool, man. It definitely seems like, fate's on your side.
Hopefully you just, try to put yourself in a good situation, and, we'll see how things fall.
For sure. So I got to ask, cause I had no idea until you shared your story. So you went to law school,
right?
Lawyer, and then you also have joined the Army, and you're in active duty. So before we get into more of the, strength and endurance side, could you kind of talk about that? And I guess, your decision to go into sort of those two, career paths, but also how you decided to continue to stick with, being in the health and fitness industry over being, a full-time attorney?
Sure. So the law school part, I graduated, undergrad, and my sights were set on wanting to be, a professional golfer. And when that didn't work out, I said, well, gosh, what the heck am I good at? At 21, 22 years old, whatever I was. And I said, well, I'm good at school. So I said, and so I said, well, I'll go to law school, and it's, law degree is useful. And so went off to law school. Was not really a fan of, no one really likes law school, I guess you could say, especially the first year or so. But, when I graduated, I kind of had the degree. I had to do something with it. And, worked, most of my career as a lawyer was as a prosecutor. So, trying to put, bad people in jail. Probably the toughest thing about that world was just every single human interaction you have with people is adversarial. It's us versus them. And even the smallest things you're arguing over, it just kind of wears on you after a while. I mean, there are a lot of good things that came out of it. I had a great office that I worked with. I think in terms of the presentation skills that you develop there, basically just kind of get thrown to the wolves. The first day, it's like, okay, here's a stack of files. Okay, go represent us. I mean, there was somewhat of a mentorship process, but it's pretty much you just thrown in. You kind of get over any fear that you have of looking like a fool in public, because I've been publicly emasculated in front of judges and all sorts of people, standing there looking like a fool so many times. So after it happens a few times, you just kind of get used to it. And when you're up in front of talking to people, it's you've looked like a fool so many times that you realize, okay, I'll still live even if I look like a fool again, because it's probably going to happen again. And so, so got into the health and fitness side. That was kind of a side gig when I was, in, law. And then, joined, the Army in 2013. And that's where I'm at right now. What I'm doing there now is it's in transition. right now. So it's, don't want to get too much into that side of it. But I will say in terms of the health and fitness part of it, it has been a very unique lens into seeing how, a certain population of athletes, so you like to use the term tactical athlete now, how that certain population of people works. And there's a whole different set of demands on the military side than, say, athletes, even though it's the same body, it's the same, jumping and throwing and all those types of things, same movements. In the military, you don't necessarily get to pick when your games are. There's no, okay, we're playing on Monday, we're playing on Thursday, these are what our practices are. Basically, when they're out in deployment, that, the Baghdad's going to shoot and throw bombs on their schedule, not on your schedule. And you don't necessarily get to recover on your own schedule. You don't get to plan on your own schedule. So it's very asymmetric and a completely different set of demands than you might expect from the athletic side. And then along with that, just the whole mental side of things as well. There is, we talk about there's a whole, thought process in terms of the health and fitness side, in terms of, mental toughness training and, everyone trying to say, no pain, no gain, and all that type of stuff. And you're trying to balance that with that military population versus some of the different demands that you might have on the civilian side.
Wow. That is some incredible perspective there. I really, really appreciate, you kind of going into that. I think that's really cool. And, thank you for sharing. Sure.
It's, and I'm sure we can kind of weave some of that back in as we get into some of our planned topics as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift gears a little bit. So let's talk a little bit. Obviously you touched on golf, and triathlon, and you're also a USA triathlon coach, correct?
Right.
So, let's talk about the balance between becoming, a really good endurance athlete, a good performer, but also maintaining and continuing to build strength, because it is a difficult balance. And, I'm very interested to hear how you've done that, and I'm sure others are as well.
Sure. And I think you'll have some great perspective on it as well with, your rowing background. I don't know a lot about rowing, but I think it's probably pretty similar in terms of that balance of, starting with, you need to put in the volume. There's always, you can fill us in here in terms of the rowing culture, but, in running, swimming, biking, triathlon, there's that debate is always going to rage, high volume versus low volume. And even the people in the low volume camp, if you look at it, it's still a decent amount of volume, and no one's suggesting, okay, just go out and swim 2 hours a week or row 3 hours a week and you're going to achieve some high level. So it has to start with a certain level of volume that you need to put in the miles. Then the question becomes, so how do you fit in this other stuff, in terms of the strength, in terms of the movements? And then you have to ask, well, what do I want to get out of it? First, you have to understand that the real gains for your sport are going to come from actually training the sport. So at a certain level, you can't, you'll see a lot of beginners come in and say, okay, well, I ran the stadium stairs, or I did whatever, I did squats and I got faster. Well, a lot of times it's because you're starting from such a low level that any sort of additional physical activity somewhat related to that pursuit is going to make you better. If we get to the higher levels, and absolutely, you need to put in the time in a particular sport. So just understanding that whatever you do in the gym, it is entirely complementary to the main thing of the sport. Now, the big thing, first would be injury prevention. We're looking at imbalances. We're just trying to become more robust. That's generally our first priority when it comes to the strength side of things. You also have to look at general health as well. Just a lot of times you can get some hormonal imbalances people get when you're putting in some high miles. You want to maintain some level of just general balance to the whole body. There's been some research, I don't have the citations off the top of my head, but that doing some strength training after a workout of endurance can help reduce some of the catabolic effects of the endurance training. In terms of the scheduling side of things, That's a whole art form to itself in terms of trying to figure out, well, how much and when, before, after. But it first has to start with understanding where it comes on the priority list. So for triathlon, for example, and this is as much for the coaches as for the practitioners, but understanding that the strength side of things, if you're a strength coach, for instance, you might be the fifth or even sixth most important person in that individual's support network. So let's take triathlon because it tells the example pretty well. You might have, so the person running your schedule is probably the most important person in the performance team. Then you might have a technique coach for swimming, a technique coach for running. You have a bike fitter, you have a nutrition coach, because we have in triathlon, we call nutrition the fourth discipline. And then you might, you want to do some strength, but that comes after all that other stuff. So from the coaching side, you have to appreciate that when someone comes into your gym and they're a general population person, for example, whatever you're doing strength wise, that's probably the most important thing that they're doing in terms of their fitness. Nutrition might, for a weight loss client, maybe, the nutritionist might be the most important person. But in general, your mindset is, okay, what am I going to do to add to this person's press, to add to this person's deadlift? Whereas when you're programming on the endurance side, whether it's for yourself, whether it's someone else, adding numbers to your key lifts or to anything really is just strictly incidental to carrying forward and being consistent with a certain level of strength. And that's a tough mindset for some people to take, always having to think, okay, I got to push forward. I got to always do more. I always have to make it count. But understanding that one of the most important things in endurance training, and I'd say for probably any training, is not so much how you're managing your peak periods, but what are you doing in those non-peak periods to set you up for the next peak period? So a lot of people will go to the other extreme as well. Well, they'll say, well, okay, I'm in the middle of a big training block. I'm just not going to do anything in terms of strength. And then they let it atrophy. And then when they come back they'll say, okay, now it's the off season. I put my bike away. I'm swimming less or whatever. And then jump back into the gym. They started from a fairly low level. Whereas if you just keep just a little bit in there just to maintain, then you're starting the next level. They're starting the next block at a higher level. And that's one thing you always need to look out for. Is always plan for that next season, even if it means just a little bit of maintenance. And the one thing that I've learned over the years is, especially as I've gotten older, is it doesn't take a lot to maintain. It takes a lot, especially once you're experienced, to reach a much higher level. But the amount that you need to maintain any given skill is actually not an enormous amount, especially once you have a big training base behind you. So the other thing, probably the other big key with endurance, and this actually I probably should have put this second in terms of importance, is understanding that what you're doing in the gym, it should be focused on those qualities that are not being addressed in the sport itself. So for example, for an endurance athlete, you'd want to focus on strength. You'd want to focus on mobility, not, as many people do, turning the gym into an additional conditioning session. Like, okay, I got to run from exercise to exercise, try to keep my heart rate up, or it's like, why are we sitting here waiting for 3 minutes between sets? I want to go, because that's what I do in my sport. So training more like a pure strength athlete than using your 2 or 3 or 4 sessions in the gym as another conditioning session to get your heart rate up. Because if you're putting in decent volume, and even if you're not putting in decent volume, what you're getting in the triathlon side or rowing side, whatever the sport may be, that's enough conditioning that you don't need to go sneak in more conditioning sessions in the gym. So that would be another big key in an area where people often fry themselves, unfortunately.
That's a great pearl right there of wisdom, that you don't necessarily need to kind of be hammering it all the time, especially when you're in the gym setting. It's a great opportunity, great environment to, like you said, work on your weaknesses or imbalances, and really slow things down and build greater awareness as an athlete.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to go easy. It just means you don't need to cram everything into a tight package of I'm going to do this circuit workout where I'm going to do as many reps as possible, one exercise, run to the next, and I just keep going from exercise to exercise. And we can tie some strong first principles in here, where how, grease the groove is such a valuable way to train, where you're basically doing, and not everyone has the luxury of training that way throughout a day, for instance, but just where you'll do your strength exercise, you'll pause, you'll wait till you're ready for the next one. One story I've got on that is I went up to train with Ollie Quinn, a Strong First team leader, one of the strongest human beings on the planet, lifting trucks and cars and all that kind of stuff. But so I didn't go lift trucks and cars with him, and it was an easy day for him, so he didn't lift any vehicles or homes or anything like that at the time. But when we went up to train, I went to work on my bent press because that's kind of one of his signature lifts, and he's one of the best in the world at it. And so when we trained, I had a free day, so it wasn't like, okay, we got a 45-minute session, let's do it. I was up there for like 5-6 hours. And basically the way we trained and the way he trains, because he's a professional strongman, that's his training style. And we kind of just, train for 6 hours or so. But basically it was, we did a normal warm up, 20 minutes of, get ups and arm bar types of things. But we basically do a lift or a couple attempts at it. And then we'd rest for 10, 15 minutes, just sit and relax and talk. And then, okay, feel ready for another try? It's like, okay, sure. I go do another rep. But you're always going into it fresh. And at the end of 5-6 hours, even though we'd lifted several tons of weight over the course of the day, it actually feels stronger. And because you're able to, with those rest periods, you're able to express the strength. You're able to, focus on the skill of strength that you were thinking about with each lift. And as you go on, the body gets better. You learn all these different cues with it. So to kind of tie it all together, I went out and did a 15-mile run next day and felt fine because there was no lingering soreness in it. It was all done in a way, even though we were doing some fairly heavy lifting, it was all done in a way that the body is able to recover and the body is able to learn from each experience attempting those lifts. So again, if you might not have 6 hours to spread out your workout session, but that's just one effective way for the endurance side, especially to focus on those cues or focus on those domains that aren't necessarily being addressed within the sport in a way that's not going to detract from your training. It's not going to leave you sore. It's not going to leave you with any additional fatigue that you already have from putting in lots of miles. Yeah,
absolutely. The work that you do on the strength and conditioning side should always complement your sport. The sport's the number one priority. And I think that's something that, we need to continue to drive home like you have. But I also think the point where you brought up about grease the groove is a great way to train, and you're getting in over that time period. You're actually getting in quite a high volume of work. You're staying very fresh. You're allowing yourself to recover, and it is something. I think it's hard for people to sometimes wrap their head around that concept because it does require one, trust of the process, and two, discipline.
Right, because a lot of times people, their metric for how effective this workout was, a lot of times the metric is how much did I sweat or how sore am I? And when you're doing grease the groove, you're not going to get sore. And it almost seems too good to be true when you're explaining to people. It's like you're going to get stronger, you're going to get better, but it doesn't really feel like you're working that hard. Now that said, there are certainly times where you need to sweat and it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. Like we were talking about offline with like the snatch test. You're just doing 2 snatches at a time throughout the day. You're probably not going to pass the snatch test, doing that. So for the non kettlebell people listening, so the snatch test is to get to, become certified, as a strong first instructor. You need to snatch the 24 kilogram, kettlebell for males 100 times in 5 minutes. So you obviously need to put in some time, whether it's snatching, whether it's swinging, whatever it is. So that type of thing, yeah, you need to put in the work. But in terms of, your basic foundational strength, grease the groove is one of the best ways to go about it, because it's not only a conditioning element. A lot of what we do with strength is skill, and that's going back to my background in sports with golf. That's one of the things that attracted me to this way of that we teach in Strong First, in terms of the skill of strength. And lifting is not just getting that weight overhead. It's the skill of using all the elements in your body to perform the lift in the most effective way.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about it too. It's sort of very subtle and underlying. The people in the community, the instructors, know it and understand it, but people that aren't learning from an instructor or may not be as familiar with Strong First, there's always a very mindful, engaged, neural component to it. You're a very thoughtful practice of how you're moving your body and how you're moving your body with the weight and around the weight.
Exactly. And the thing too is that, we call it the skill of strength, and the term grease the groove has been applied to it by Pavel, but in reality, the whole skill process, that happens so many other places throughout the world of movement, whether it's in martial arts or gymnastics, or I also have a performing arts background. I played classical trumpet growing up, and I've also played some jazz too. I wasn't just a total classical nerd. I could swing a little bit, but when you watch musicians practice, or look, I was thinking about this the other day. You go watch just some garage band of some teenage punks. They're not going to go out and say, okay, our practice today, we're going to do 3 sets of 2 minutes of this song, and we're going to take 45 seconds recovery. Now, they're going to run through it. They're going to run through it and be like, okay, dude, that was okay. Let's pick it up a little bit here, and then, okay, let's try it again. And they're going to run through it, but they're going to get better. And that's how performing artists learn. And, that's how they get better. And that's the exact same brain, same, motor learning process that we use for strength. And I think when you express it in terms of those type of things that people are maybe more familiar with in the world, it makes a little more sense in terms of this mysterious exercise science, complex chemistry, biology type of thing, where we're so used to quantifying all these different things, that it's really the same process that a lot of people have gone through themselves in many other skills, even going back to, when we learn as infants and babies. There's no reps and sets for learning how to stand and walk and crawl and all that stuff, that you kind of just explore and you learn and you get better and let biology run its course.
Boom. That was another pearl right there, man. That was beautiful. So building on that, let's talk a little bit about, you work a lot in the SFB program, and kind of building on Grease the Groove. You've said to me offline too that a lot of the body weight skills are great because it allows you the applicability to train sort of anytime, anywhere, minimal equipment, but the transfer over and benefit to the endurance side is very high. So could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. So I wish I could take credit for having some grand vision of how the SFB would fit into my endurance training, but in reality, a lot of it was just dumb luck, because I went to the very first SFB that was held back in 2013 when Pavel came to what was then my home gym in Arizona. And it was like, hey, this is, I could run to the gym from here. So, Pavel's going to be here. All these leadership's going to be here. So I took the SFB, and it was like, wow, it was tied in so many beautiful things from the SFG side and made so many things make sense. And so I encourage everyone to, who's already SFG, to explore the SFB program, whether in the 1 day or in the 2-day certification. But the nice thing about the SFB is that, kind of what we talked about before, there's a lot of things to fit in when you're training for endurance. As you said, you need to put in the time, and there's no way around that. And part of the thing, especially when we're planning for endurance athletes, is that there's not only the training time that you need to put in, there's transition time between, okay, I got to go to the pool, got to drive to the running trail, got to drive to the boathouse, whatever the case may be. So the SFB, you can do that pretty much any place. I can drop right now down the floor and then knock out a one-arm push-up if I want to do that right now. You can do the same right there. You can do that in an office. You can do that, outside waiting in line someplace. So it's very portable. And it's not only for when you're at home, but when you're traveling. So you don't have to be victim to crappy hotel gyms that go up to a 15-pound dumbbell and have a 20-year-old elliptical machine and 2 broken down Nautilus pieces of junk. So you're never victim to your circumstances. And so that's when we talked about the whole idea of continuity. It's not just how are you training at your peak settings, but when you're in between your peak settings, how well can you maintain with the least amount of input required how can you maintain most efficiently between your key blocks. So for a lot of people, it's going to be the kettlebell or the barbell. But the body weight, because it is so well grounded in the basics of the principles that we teach in all those domains. And not only is it so well grounded, it's really the foundation for what we do in all those domains, learning to harness the skills of your own body and learning all these intricate details of how different parts of your body are essential to maximizing your ability to express strength in each of those lifts. So that's the foundation for those other areas. And when you have a strict body weight training block, whether it's by design or whether it's by circumstance, you learn a lot of things that help you in these other areas. In terms of the relevance to endurance, number one, it's time efficient. Number two, when it forces you to train grease the groove, you are able to, allows you to maximize your recovery time from your endurance training. So you're not putting in maybe your high volume of swings, your high volume of pressing, but you're still able to build those tension, build those or express those tension cues, express all these different areas that we teach and all those other lifts. So it really helps maintain a good base level and is very harmonious with everything else we're trying to accomplish with all the demands that we have upon ourselves on the endurance side, both the time required as well as the energy demands required. Because whether it's you're sitting on a bike, whether you're running, whether you're sitting in the boat, a lot of times we're just tired because you have to put in the volume. But on the other hand, you don't want to just say, okay, I'm just not going to train strength because I'm tired. You need to accomplish it in the most efficient way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Being able to accomplish it efficiently. And the other thing, to echo some of what you said there about the using the body weight lifts, the one arm push up or the pistol or the tactical pull up, or even handstands or handstand push ups, any of that kind of stuff. The amount of learning that you do, there's no external apparatus. So you become so much more aware of how you're carrying your body and how there might be a difference between the left and right side when you're trying to do a one-arm push-up. So there's this real process of self-education that I've been going through because I'm currently preparing for the SFB in April. And having done the SFG first, I can say that, everything I'm doing now is not only strengthening and widening that foundation that I learned in the SFG, but I don't feel like I'm losing anything. If anything, I'm gaining, and I have much more control over my body than I ever did before.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for one story of my own is a couple years ago, a couple falls ago, I was had a temporary assignment out in California and wasn't in a situation where I was able to get to bells, and I was training for a marathon at the time as well, so putting in some decent run mileage. And so I basically didn't touch a bell other than I think I taught a course at a place that had bells and had to move some bells out of the way. So I did touch a bell, but I just strictly trained one-on-one leg push-up and tactical pull-ups. Didn't even do any lower body stuff because I was running a pretty decent amount. And it came back to the bells about 2-3 months later, however long it was, and didn't really have much. Maybe my swing endurance was a little down, but I actually got better on some of my weaker components in the Turkish get-up, for instance. So my left side tends to disconnect a little bit in the early components of the get-up. But doing all those one-on-one leg push-ups on my left side, it really strengthened the scapula and strengthened all the components that go into the stability there. To follow up on your comment about just how, it forces you to look inward. I was thinking the other day about just, all the different things that I personally think about in the one-on-one leg push. It could be everything from gaze. It could be anything from your chin position to hand position to where we're loading on the hand, whether it's the palm or the heel or where you want to place more emphasis, your elbow position, the groove of the elbow, the position of the shoulder, the scapula, the ipsilateral glute, the contralateral glute, the driving the down leg or down foot into the ground, the position of the up leg. And obviously you're not thinking about those in the same lift. I hope you're not, because you'll probably face plant if you do. You're just not going to go anywhere. But those are all things that along the way I might think about one of those different things in any given lift. But over time, I've examined each of those areas in myself, and it's helped me be able to relate to students as well, because everyone's going to have a different cue that works for them. We're going to have different needs. And that's one of the beautiful things about the body weight is that all those different things, it forces you, because there is no external implement other than the ground or a bar for pull-ups. You are forced to look inward and you're forced to look at all those things. And what is especially beautiful about the system is that each one of those things, they will relate directly back to your kettlebell lifts in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not the first time you go back to the bell, but if you keep that catalog in your mind of all those things that you thought about, especially those areas where you may be somewhat deficient on one side versus the other, at some point that's going to come back and express itself somewhere in a kettlebell lift for yourself, or you're going to spot something in your student that could help them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been one of the things that I've really enjoyed recently is because I'm just doing simple and sinister twice a week and then 3 days of the SFB skills. And that's exactly what I found. There's so much more proprioception. There's so much more feedback. I kind of notice little things. And the other thing I want to touch on is that I love how you mentioned all those, cues or the technical points that you think about for the one-on-one leg push-up. And it's like, I want to make the point, well, it's just a push-up, right? Well, not really. There's so much engagement. There's so much learning. There's so much happening there that goes into being able to do effectively a one-arm, one-leg push-up. And so it kind of, again, it's lost on the surface, but you only know that by taking that journey and trying to explore and start, integrating that lift into your practice. And eventually when you're able to do it, but not many people are going to be able to appreciate that, how many nuances are in that lift.
Exactly. And I love the word that you use there, their journey, because it truly is a journey. Like for me, when I started, there wasn't the SFB, your user course. There was just basically a naked warrior. There was a few blog posts out there. So when I prepped for the thing the first time, I mean, I probably had more face plants than successful lifts starting out, just because it's like, how do you do this? And didn't have the guidance necessarily to go through a lot of the progressions that we teach in the course, the elevation progressions, a lot of the tension drills are the same, but we've really dialed in with the course all the different elevation and different variations you can do to find what's necessary for that particular student or yourself. And going back to the concept of journey that you talked about, some people might think, well, gosh, why? That sounds absolutely miserable thinking about all those different things. I just want to lift and, I just want to turn my brain off. But again, you're not thinking about all those in one lift, but number two, it's you need to think into the future. It's not just about, okay, just mastering this one lift. It's about once you're good at you going from that whole unconscious incompetence all the way up to unconscious competence. That's just part of the process of it's. At first, you're just thinking about all these different things to get it technically down. But eventually, the goal is to get it so it's so easy and so flowing that it becomes a beautiful expression of strength. So it's not just how are you doing the lift? Am I doing it technically correctly? But am I doing it in such a way that it looks great? And am I doing it in such a way that my strength is, that I have such deep ownership of what I am doing that I can express it in so many other different ways than just the one-on-one leg push-up. That's one of the things that, when I teach, assist at the SFB curriculums, I assist with, our chief SFB, Karen Smith. And that's one of the things that really stands out when she does her demos. It's not just about, okay, I've got all these check marks in terms of, this is elbows in the right place, hands in the right place, foot's in the right place. No, it's not just that. It's how beautiful does she make the lift look? And is it something where people just say, I'm not like, wow, that's how it should look. And that's a glorious expression of how the human body is supposed to move. So everything that we do on these basic levels where we're talking all this technique stuff, and it's all serving a higher purpose of making the body perform in its own very special way, whatever you want it to be, whether it's a 1 rep maximum expression of strength or whether it's the ability to put one foot in front of the other thousands and thousands of times to get from point A to point B as fast as we possibly can.
I love it, man. That's awesome. That's beautiful. So let's kind of, let's shift a little bit more. I'm personally curious. So we talked a ton about strength. Back to the endurance side. So when you're training for your events, and are you more of a low volume guy or a high volume guy in terms of for endurance? And two, how are you setting up your training? Are you doing it off of pace, heart rate?
So I tend to be more toward the high volume side. In practice lately, I've been more low volume, but I think ultimately it's not just high versus low. It's right volume. It's appropriate volume. So one person's hell week might be another person's recovery week. But I think it just goes back to, what we talked about earlier is that you need to put in the miles, and the miles for one person, what's high versus low is going to be different for every person. That said, the endurance, the stamina side is ultimately going to be your foundation, and you can try to circumvent things a little bit in the short term to layer on a lot of speed to try to make up for lower volume. But at the end of the day, you're always going to need some volume base. In terms of how I set up my schedule, it's different based on sport. So for swimming, it's always going to be pace. Everything is very strictly off pace. That just makes sense because that's just how we train in swimming, and everything is down to the second in terms of our 50 yard or 100 yard or intervals. With running, it's going to vary. So for my easy days on running, I basically don't even look at pace, other than just, okay, I'm going to run for a set amount of time. And if I feel tired, it'll be extremely easy. If I'm feeling okay, then it'll be a little less slow. For harder days, it'll vary. It'll depend on the point in the year. And this is one of the things that has really been very important for me as I've gotten more experienced, is during times when we're peaking for a key event, we'll be more strict in adhering to particular paces on the run. Whereas I need to hit this particular pace for my intervals, and that's what we need to do. But there are other times in the year when I'll do what's called fartlek training, where you're basically going out and running. I'll say, okay, I'm going to run 18 cycles of where I go 1 minute hard and then run 1 minute easy, and repeat that over and over. And they're all different types of, fartleks are only limited by your imagination, but fartlek is a Swedish word for those who don't know, it's for speed play, where basically literally you're going out and just playing with your speed. And so that's one thing that I'll do a lot, because for me, I found it works very well with the day-to-day variability of the body. So if I need to get in a hard workout, I'm maybe not at my best. I'm still able to get in a good hard workout, but that extra, say 5 seconds a mile of trying to hit what might be on my normal goal pace, that might put me in a hole in terms of fatigue and overtraining if I had to squeeze out that little extra bit of speed. Whereas if you do a fartlek, you kind of go with what your body brings with you for the day. So as you get closer to a race, yeah, you're going to need to be right on top of exact paces. But for a lot of the time, it's just go out, run hard, get the feeling of running fast and smooth. So that's been very important for my run training. Usually the run will have one long run on the weekends. It'll depend on what I'm training for, anywhere from 12 to more miles if it's a marathon. One sort of stamina type of workout, so a tempo run is what we call it. So it'd be say 3 to 5 miles of either continuous or some type of intervals at what we'd call a comfortably hard pace. So you're not racing all out. But you're still going fast and easy. And then one type of speed day. So it could be, say, one of my favorites for myself and for my athletes is, a minute hard, minute easy, anywhere from 10 to 20 cycles of that. Or again, with fartleks, you're really only limited by your imagination. So you could go out and say, okay, I'm just going to 10 times, I'm going to pick out some random tree or mailbox or telephone pole in the distance and just going to run as hard as I can to it. And then go and recover. And then when I feel like running again, that's a perfectly good fartlek. And it's from the coaching side, it's tough to assign that type of stuff because you're not able to get the same feedback from the athlete. But it's when you're training yourself and you just want to get the legs turning over, but not really bury yourself into the ground. That's a good way to do it, as well. In terms of the biking, it's almost embarrassing how little I've biked over the last 6 months or so. And I say it embarrassing because I've actually had some pretty good success racing the second half of last year. I know this might sound contradictory to what we said before about having to put in the time of the sport, but I really do believe that the simple and sinister and you swing in the 40 kilogram or the 48 kilogram bell. I think there is some transfer there to the bike. Directly, obviously, that's not ideally how I train, but it's better than, it's probably the best situation given, all the other stuff I have going on. I'm just not able to put in a big, high volume of work on the bike. So it kind of just, makes it work. That said, there is some research, and I have an article that I'm working on for Strong First in terms of simple and sinister and how it works with, endurance training. One of the research pieces in there actually is at least one, maybe two articles where there has been shown that kettlebell ballistics have been able to improve cycling to some degree. Again, it's not something I say, hey, I want to go make it. If you want to go make an Olympic team or you want to win a national championship, cutting your bike mileage to zero and just doing simple and sinister is probably not the way to get there. But if you want to continue to race at a certain level and then have a background, some lifetime miles to go on, which I do have from in my younger years when I was putting in higher miles on the bike, it is a way that you can create a workable solution.
That's awesome, man. So, you touched on the endurance side. So real quick, how do you fit in your strength? So if you're doing a long run over the weekend, what type of strength work are you doing on that day? If you're doing a tempo day or a speed day, just so people kind of have an all around picture of how you're balancing the strength work and the endurance work and kind of waiving the load throughout the week.
Sure. So that's a great question. And, so this is a really important key that I've found for myself and other people over the years is that we'll schedule the main strength days on the same day as the hardest run days or the hardest swim days. And if possible, actually, but it's always going to be after the main session. Some people might say, wow, that sounds horrible. That it's going to be such a hard day. But number one, with simple and sinister, as you know, it's something that it's challenging, but it's something you knock out quickly. So the mental load required to get that work done is not, it doesn't add a whole lot. It's, 30 minutes at absolute most. And, if you're fairly advanced within your certain weight progression, it can take 17 minutes when you're just going from start to finish. So that's it. That has been one of the most important things. And number two with that is it teaches you to train within yourself. So if you know that, okay, I need to get my strength workout in, again, it might sound like, gosh, how is that even possible to do it after a hard run? So number one, it reminds you that to not turn, say, your hard run into an impromptu race. It reminds you to leave a little bit in the tank and say, okay, I'm going to train at 90%, not at 100%. I'm going to train in a way that I can come back in a few days and be strong for my next workout. And it also reminds you that, okay, I need to leave something in the tank to get the strength workout in. And the reason that it's so important to do it on the same day is that if you try to do it on different days, the schedule just becomes so ridiculously chaotic. So the term we like to use is just condense the load into fewer days out of the week, give yourself more recovery between workouts. We just find that works better, because the alternative would be, say, if I was to do an interval track workout on Wednesday. If I do simple and sinister or any sort of intense lower body lifting on Tuesday, the track workout is not going to go well on Wednesday. You might as well not even go to the track. And even if you could gut through it, then you're setting yourself up for greater injury. And that would be the same type of thing for, on the weekend with the long run, where later in the day, I might just, again, simple and sinister. What's so great about it is it takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it may be. You do that later in the day. And then, so if I was to do a long run on Sunday, say do the, long run in the morning, come back later in the day, knock out simple and sinister. Then I've got Monday and Tuesday to sort of, to let the legs rest and be ready for Wednesday for a track workout, for example, or even Tuesday. In terms of how it fits with swimming, simple and sinister, again, it's so nice is that it hasn't made my shoulders excessively tired. One reason I haven't done a lot of overhead pressing lately is because that doesn't go very well with high level competitive swimming. So selecting appropriate exercises like the get up, like the swing, is fairly consistent with, the swimming side of things. And the only really restriction there in terms of how am I going to schedule a strength around that is that I'm just not going to do it earlier in the day before a swim. So sometimes you can do it afterward, but to kind of summarize it, the main rules that I have is number one, same day as your key strength work, as your key endurance workout, and number two, after the workout. So it doesn't interfere with what you're trying to accomplish in the main session.
That's great. Those 2 points you made there, again, you're putting the endurance sport as the priority. The strength work is complementary to that. And so you're making sure that you're not taking away from that training session. And then the other point you made about, waiving the load, if you're having a hard workout on a Tuesday and, lifting session, you come in and try to do speed work on a Wednesday, you've already taken away from that session before you showed up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
beautiful.
Yeah. And you just, it's a lot of trial and error to kind of figure that out. Sometimes it takes, there's definitely some self-experimentation is going to work for a lot of people, but I think those are pretty hard and fast rules about, like no heavy lower body lifting right before, the key, running work. I think with biking and I've gotten away with it sometimes, where I've been able to get on the bike after a simple and sinister type of session. Not earlier in the day, but, the day before. I think it's a little different because you're not using quite those stabilizing muscles for biking the same way that you use for running. It's not ideal, but sometimes I've been in situations with traveling or whatnot where, it's like, this is the only time where I could get in, get in a simple and sinister workout. And the alternative would be to have, 6 or 7 days between strength sessions. So it's like, okay, I'll just suck it up. You do it on this day and do the bike the next day, and you make it work that way. But so I think there's a little more little more leeway for something like biking. I'm sure you'd have some experimentation on your side in terms of how it fits with rowing, because I think rowing probably looks a little similar to biking in terms of the fact that we're not, we're kind of locked into an apparatus. We're not using some of these stabilizers like in swimming or running in the same way. But yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error involved, and you kind of start with the basic principles and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a component of, you have the science and then you have the art, and there's the experimentation part, because so much of it is individual. There's figuring out the athlete, what their needs and demands are. And again, what you said at the very beginning, sort of their training age, if they're a complete beginner versus somebody that's more experienced, both on the endurance and strength and conditioning side, their ability to adapt and recover is going to be far greater than somebody that's just starting from ground zero. So those are all, important variables to consider when writing a program.
Exactly. And that's a great point, that you bring up with training age. And that's something that a lot of high level endurance athletes don't realize, is that your training age might be 15, 20, 30 in your sport. And you've got your medals and trophies all over the place. But when you walk into the gym, your training age for that person might be like 8 months, might be a year. I mean, you might be an infant. You might just be, you're a completely different setting. You need to be trained, no different than the person in the intro, the kettlebell class that comes in. And yeah, maybe if you're overflowing with genetic ability, yeah, you might progress pretty fast in the strength world. But when you're starting out, just because you've been on a bike for 20 years or have run for 20 years doesn't mean you need to train like someone who's spent 20 years in the gym. And you need to just, like we talk about with, the SFB, it's back to basics, tension, relaxation, positioning, mobility, all that stuff.
Yeah, that is super, super important. Because most people, just like you said, they've been training for 15 or 20 years. It doesn't necessarily transfer over to the strength side, and they just need to be patient. And, again, you put in the time on the endurance side, you have to put in time on the strength side, and really take the time to learn and own the lifts.
Exactly. Yeah. Just, master the fundamentals, and everything comes from there.
Awesome. So we're right at an hour right now. So, we had some other topics, but let's talk about, to give people a little bit more perspective of just how strong of a guy you are, some of your PRs. So, why don't you share those?
Well, I think in the grand scheme of things, I don't know that I'm that strong when you look at people, squatting 1,000 pounds and stuff like that. I think I'm decent for someone who's a skinny looking little guy on a bike running around town in spandex and triathlon shoes. But, so on the strength side, I could do, beast get up, 48 kilogram get up, right, left, one-on-one leg push up from an elevation or decline, I guess you could say. So feet elevated. That's a kind of funny story. And I had forgotten. That's actually in our certification manual, for the Strong First SFB. I hadn't even forgotten it was there, and we were teaching the course in October in Corpus Christi. And one of the students went up to Karen and was like, what's this elevated thing? And she's like, I've never seen anyone do that. And so I just went over there and did it, and from a decent, not a high, but I think it was off a 45-pound plate, and went home and just kept elevating. So I could do that right, left. The left, I have not posted a video of that. Yeah, just a couple of pictures because it's not quite ready for public consumption. I can do it, but it's not quite there. So those are my kind of the two strength things that I'm most proud of with the Strong First part. I haven't been under a barbell in a very long time, and I think that relates to a lot of what we've been talking about, the time demands of the sport, and trying to find what are the best implements for yourself, because you can always bring your body, you can always bring your kettlebells out to the center of the track, but you're not really going to stick a power rack in the back of your car and drive it and set it up in lane 8 and start doing squats after the workout. In terms of the endurance side, so I had 2:39 marathon, 1:13 half. My speed golf PR was 75 in 42 minutes. And so we play regular golf course about 5 miles. So that's probably one of the PRs, and I'm probably the most unique PR that I've got, I guess you could say.
Very cool. And so even more perspective, what's your body weight, if you don't mind sharing, so that way people know in terms of like doing the beast get up and everything?
So I'm right about, usually fluctuate around 160-ish.
Okay. So for people that aren't familiar, Allan's 160 pounds doing a 106-pound Turkish get up.
And actually, I guess one of the other PRs, I guess you could say, when I went to visit Ollie Quinn, he has a 94 kilogram kettlebell. So we did 5 swings with that thing. They weren't things of beauty, I think. They weren't maybe SFG testing standards legal, but got the thing moving and didn't face plan.
That's awesome, man. Very cool.
Or didn't face plan on video. I might have face planted on a non-video one, but I don't remember.
Awesome. Okay, so you touched on briefly, but didn't go too much into it. But let's talk about this a little bit. You've done some research. You're writing some articles for Strong First, and then also the FMS. So your perspective, quote unquote, in the trenches here. So let's chat about that a little.
Sure. So what in particular?
I guess just the research you've been doing and what you're, kind of what you're working towards publishing. Oh, okay. You don't have to go too much into it because I know it's not ready yet but just kind of share so people get a taste for it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I thought, you were talking about something we had, talked about here, but now this was something we talked about, offline. Now I know where you're going. Okay. Yeah. So basically, so with the Army, we had some research, where we looked at, kind of this, first we looked at the FMS on a group of, service individuals, and we compared it to a different set of tests, that, other people within, the Army had come up with as a way to possibly screen people without having to haul an FMS kit, downrange. Because, it's not, when you deploy and go to some far off place, you can't bring your entire, can't bring everything with you from back home. And for those of us who, are fans of the FMS, it's might be hard to believe, but there are more things important in a war zone than carrying, an FMS kit around, amazingly.
Right.
But so they came up with a set of tests that, we're hoping, or just want to see if they compared well to the FMS's injury predictive ability within a certain group of soldiers. And the results were, they came together, they were fairly consistent with each other. So that was good news in terms of the ability of people to potentially screen individuals out in the field without having to haul an FMS kit downrange. And that was the main finding they looked at. Another thing that was interesting with it was there was an ankle mobility screen that was part of the this new screen that they came up with. So it was interesting that it had some predictive ability because we know from the FMS and its breakouts that your ankle mobility is one component that goes into the squat. It's something that not so much for the FMS, but in the Y balance test, ankle mobility is very important there. So it was interesting to see how the different components relate from isolated ankle mobility to ankle mobility in the FMS, knowing that, the squat is one part of the FMS. There's been research on, how the deep squat itself can have some predictive ability for, injury risk. And then looking at the fairly robust research in the Y balance test world in how, ankle mobility and just that dynamic ankle mobility and multiplanar movement when the Y balance can also have some injury predictive value.
That's incredible, man. We'll definitely make sure that you hit me up, you share that one with me when it's published and ready to share with the world.
For sure.
Very cool. So let's move to some rapid fire questions. These are just sort of like I wrap up with each guest and very quick answers and what you kind of can share with everybody from your experiences overall as an athlete and trainer and coach.
Sure.
So going back in time, given your knowledge base and experience at this point in your life, what advice would you give Allan Phillips 10 years ago?
Yes, I was prepared for this one, and I think probably what I would say is to not let what you do as an athlete define yourself as a person. I think we walk a very fine line, especially the higher you get in sport. It's a very fine line between our identity is often tied to what we do on the athletic field. It's tied to what we do, really anything professionally. And, if you care about what you do a lot, your identity is going to be very near and dear to that sport or whatever it may be. But you can't let it cross the line to where it becomes, your sense of being. And because when that happens, it imposes such a higher level of pressure on your performance on the athletic field, and you're competing with so much more at stake with like your whole being, riding on the outcome of the athletic event. And so with a little more maturity, being able to, separate those things and have a more healthy perspective of, your own identity in relation to what you're doing in the sport.
That is absolutely priceless advice. Everything you touched on there, that is something I kind of had to learn on my own and stuff. And I hope others out there listen to that and really take it with a big grain of salt and listen to it and integrate that into their life, because that is very, very important. So thank you.
Sure.
Okay. How has your training changed 10 years ago to today?
So probably doing less volume, not just because any philosophical change, but just a little busier with other things in life. The strength is definitely different. Back then, with the endurance culture, it was just okay. You do some abs, you do some push-ups here and there, maybe do some pull-ups. But now it's what I've been exposed to with strength in terms of training for actual strength. It's just a completely different world where, I wasn't training for one-on-one like push-ups back then. I had no idea what a kettlebell was, back then, and no idea all these different, principles, that we now, teach, so importantly within the Strong First system. And so it's just completely, the strength part of it is just a completely different world. From kind of these, high volume calisthenic type of things that didn't do a whole lot. Maybe made your abs look a little better, but, in terms of performance, wasn't doing a whole lot for me. And so just training for pure strength now. And, that's probably the biggest difference.
Very cool. So even following up on that, what's your personal favorite strength training exercise if you had to pick one?
So this is a tough one because the one-arm one-leg push-up has a very special place in my heart, because that's what a lot of people know me for. And it's always nice when you have an ego lift that makes you feel good and special. But objectively, I'd probably have to say the Turkish get-up. In part because it's almost like when you ask, if you had 3 wishes, what are you going to wish for? I'd say, well, I wish for 3 more wishes. When you say, what's your favorite exercise? I say Turkish get-up, because that allows me to answer with, when I say Turkish get-up, I've effectively said like a bunch of different exercises, because there's not only the 6 or 7 stages, whatever it is, within Turkish get-up, but you can do it slow, you can do it fast, you can do it heavy, You could do it light. You could do it hardstyle. You could do it flowing. And it's one of the most beautiful expressions of strength that we have, when done well. And you could do, it can be used for so many things, whether a maximal strength lift, it's a good assessment. And it's a gateway to so many different things that you can do with strength. And it's, when done well, it's an absolutely glorious thing to watch. And it teaches you so much about your body. So definitely the Turkish get-up if I had to pick one exercise.
I love it. Calisthenics, baby. Beautiful strength.
Absolutely.
Okay. What is one thing, you think junior athletes should be doing more of to complement their training and health?
What age are we talking about?
So like high school, junior. So like 14 to 18.
Okay. So I'm going to dance around that one a little bit, and I'm going to say it depends on where they are exactly. I think, a 14-year-old in the body of a 19-year-old is going to need something different than the 14-year-old who's a little slow to develop and still has the body of a 12-year-old. So I think the one thing that they need to do is look at where they are biologically and not just where they are chronologically. And from there, I think the answer will be fairly apparent for whatever for that individual.
Awesome. What is your best tip or advice to improve recovery from a training session?
So I'm going to answer this one a little obliquely too, and I'm going to say that a good training plan that minimizes the need or minimizes the time where you're in a hole where you need recovery. I think sometimes we get so obsessed with okay, how often should I take ice baths, or what's the best, this recovery pump, or how often should I be foam rolling? I think the first question to ask is, are you doing stuff that is making you more sore or more tired than you probably should be? And there are definitely times like in peak competition season where you don't necessarily get to pick, when your workouts are. There are definitely times where, the recovery becomes, more important. Rapid recovery becomes more important. But I think it's the first question to ask is how am I setting up my training plan in a way that recovery is most organic rather than relying on some of these synthetic ways to enhance recovery. But if I had to pick one answer in terms of, let's say we do need to recover fast. I would say just, consistent sleep. And, actually that's my one answer then.
Awesome. What is one book, everyone should read?
Everyone should read. Wow, that's a tough one. Everyone. I'll say in the health and fitness, I'll dance around this a little bit since it's hard to say what one book for everyone in the world. But for health and fitness, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, Robert Sapolsky.
Okay.
By far the most transcendent training book that I have read in shaping my thought process.
I'm writing that one down for myself.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a training book per se and strength and conditioning, but it takes you understand stress in a very unique way and makes you appreciate what we're actually doing when we're setting up a training plan for anyone.
Yeah, that's definitely important, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, final question. Okay, have you had any injuries? And if so, how has it changed your training?
Yeah, I've had, over the years, I've injured a lot of stuff. Pretty much everything lower body from running has been injured, mostly repetitive use injuries. But one thing that I will say that we can kind of tie into the kettlebell was I did have a back injury the first time I was attempting to go through the certification. So I actually missed the certification the first time. Actually missed it twice because I bailed. I signed up for San Diego, bailed, tried to do Philadelphia, wasn't healed up enough for that. So I came back the next year, for San Diego, and it was actually a great experience because I was that much more prepared. To have a year, to go through it and was able to, since the physical side of it wasn't that bad because I was so well prepared over all that long time. I was able to focus on the learning. In terms of how it changed my perspective, how it changed training, it made me realize that, no single rep is, it's better to call it off than to fight through a rep. And basically what happened, there had been a death in the family on the other side of the country. So I got all stressed and drive over there. This had been a couple weeks before the certification. I missed a week of training, came back and said, okay, just hop right back in. It's doing, I think I was doing cleans, double cleans, and okay, first rep, okay, second rep, ooh, that didn't feel good. Third rep, okay, hey, don't be a pansy, fight through it. And then, by the end of the workout, couldn't touch my toes, and if you've had back pain, you kind of get the whole deal. So it just made me appreciate the importance of the difference between pain and soreness. And it's always better to err on the side of caution. It's tough when you're dealing, it's never easy, especially when dealing with other people, because we're all going to have our own personal definitions of pain and soreness. But it's best to miss one training session, or at least you don't even have to miss a training session. Just call an audible and do something else that doesn't expose an area that might be particularly vulnerable. It's better to do that than to fight through it and try to be a tough guy, and then next thing you know, you've missed an entire season of training and competition. So just be smart, don't be a hero.
That's great. Thank you, Allan. That was awesome, man. This has been an absolute blast. We've, I think, fulfilled our goal of dropping some knowledge bombs on everybody. So hopefully everybody finds the information that we discussed today very useful in their own training and practice. So just hang on the line. Let me give you a proper goodbye, and we'll wrap it up.
Sure, it was a pleasure to be on, and I had a great time. I wish you the best personally in your own SFB journey.
Thank you for tuning in and listening. If you found the information useful in this episode, I would greatly appreciate if you would take a moment of your time and head on over to iTunes and write a review. Be sure to tune in for next week's episode, where I interview Dr. Stuart McGill, the leading spine biomechanics expert in the world.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.